Good Lord, ride all the way.
A 10,
9,
8,
7,
6,
5,
4,
3,
2.
1.
Hello and welcome to Slooh. My name is Paul Cox and today we are talking about the black moon. Or are we? We're certainly talking about the new moon as we attempt to spot a very, very young moon, only 3 days old, shortly after sunset. Now, it really is space for everyone here at Slooh as we delve into the different cultural and religious perspectives associated with new moons, both historically and in modern times. And to help us do that, we have got a wonderful group of guests joining me on the show today. First of all, we'll be revisiting an interview with Sheikh Abdul Bari Yahya of the Al Maghrib Institute. He provides an intriguing insight into the way members of the Islamic faith revere both the sun and moon. We'll also hear about the monthly practice of moon sighting. Then we're going to hear from Helen Avery. She's Slooh's spiritual correspondent, who's going to be diving right into that headline of the month, the black moon. She's going to be telling us how the black moon and the new moon are seen by modern pagan practitioners. That's going to be pretty interesting. And then, of course, we've got Slooh astronomer Bob Berman. Both of us, we're going to be chatting about all of this black moon business. We'll be talking about why, despite all the media attention, this new moon isn't actually a black moon. And we'll put to rest some of the misreporting that we've seen about the skies turning black and all manner of apparent effects people have been talking about. Now, let's take a quick look at our live images. Here we are with the panorama. You can see here, this is Slooh's Canary Islands Observatory, the flagship observatory at the Institute of Astrophysics of the Canary Islands. And what we're seeing here is this stunning image of the Pico del Teide, which is the volcano there, and the sun has just been setting behind there, and we are going to see this lovely, lovely new moon appearing in these images. Now let's hop over to the dome cam and our constellation cam. Now there we go, there are Slooh's two domes. We've actually got three domes there. There's one slightly out of shot there, and it shows you the domes are open, and inside you can see the mighty telescopes that Slooh members get to control every night. And there is this lovely, lovely image actually of, this is our constellation camera. It has an enormous field of view. There's a bit of a funny orientation, so we're kind of looking at a slight angle, but just in the top of that image, you can see appearing in the rapidly darkening sky, this 3-day-old moon just appearing like the horns of a bull in the top of that image. So we're going to keep a close eye on that. We've also got a couple of other cameras that we're going to be keeping an eye on as well. Look at this one. That's the sun setting behind Teide, and these clouds are the cloud base. We're still above the clouds, of course. We're at 8,000 feet altitude, but they've been threatening to overrun the observatory today. So we've got to keep a close eye on those as well. But of course, we've got the mighty half-meter telescope, the telescope that one of the telescopes that Slooh members use every night, and it's a particular favorite of mine for capturing the moon. It gives these enormously high-resolution images that frame the moon absolutely perfectly, and when you zoom in on the live stream, it kind of feels like you're flying over the surface of the moon. I love that telescope. Now, we've also actually got, I just wanted to show you one image that we had caught on Friday. This is actually, I think it was Thursday. We captured this incredibly old moon. So we're talking about a new moon today, but this is an incredibly old moon. The oldest we've ever imaged with Slooh. The moon was only 5 degrees above the horizon when Slooh members took that image. How cool is that? It's a tiny 3% phase. Now, you may be asking yourselves, what is a new moon? Well, that's a really old moon, but a new moon. Why did we decide to look at a 3-day-old moon rather than a brand new moon? Oh, there is the live image coming in from the half-meter telescope. There it is, the new moon. and it's just appearing. We're having to use special filters to cut down the amount of light reaching the enormous half-meter telescope. And there is our first live image. Wow, that's gorgeous, of this new moon, 3 days old. Anyway, what causes this new moon? Well, first of all, let's think about the geometry of a full moon. The moon is on one side of the Earth and the sun is on the other. So imagine the moon's in front of me, the sun's behind me, and I'm Earth. Sorry, I don't mean to big myself up like that. But what we see then is the moon fully illuminated in our night sky. And the full moon rises in the east as the sun is setting in the west. So we see a full moon every single night. But as the month rolls on, the moon continues its orbit around Earth with an ever decreasing amount of its illuminated side facing the Earth until, bang, hey, that was good timing, wasn't it? New moon. The moon lies between the Earth and the sun. So the illuminated side of the moon is actually facing away from us. And in fact, you know, the only time we can truly see the new moon is when the alignment is absolutely perfect and the moon actually passes in front of the sun, causing a spectacular solar eclipse, as we've seen so many of those gorgeous, gorgeous eclipses here at Slooh. But it's during the evenings following the new moon, shortly after sunset, when the moon is sufficiently separated from the sky, from the sun, that it appears out of the sun's glare as this incredibly thin, waxing crescent, just like we're seeing this evening. And it's these early moon sightings that are so important to the Islamic faith, as we'll discover a little bit later. So if you have a clear sky this evening, pop outside and look westward shortly after sunset, and you should see this tiny silver sliver of a 3-day-old moon hovering 15 to 20 degrees above the horizon. Now, we are going to take a very quick commercial break, but when we get back, we're going to discuss why the new moon is so important to the Islamic faith, among others. We'll be right back after this short break. And welcome back to our Black New Moon show here at Slooh, with these fabulous live images coming in from the half-meter telescope at Slooh's Canary Islands Observatory. Now, don't forget, we'll be addressing that term black moon a little bit later on in the show when I'm joined by Slooh astronomer Bob Berman. But now, we want to talk about why this new moon is incredibly important to a number of religious faiths, from ancient cultures through to modern day. It's especially important to those of the Islamic faith, whose whole religious calendar is based on the lunar cycle. And to learn more about this, we spoke to Sheikh Abdul Bari Yahya from the Al Maghrib Institute about the way Islam uses the moon to mark time. It's a practice known as moon sighting, where they attempt to make the earliest sighting of the new moon. And it's this verified sighting that marks the beginning of a new Islamic month.
The beginning of each month is determined by the actual sighting of the crescent, the waxing crescent. The first sighting is the first day of the month, and of course we determine when Ramadan begins with the actual sighting of the crescent, and also the beginning of Hajj, also the beginning of Hajj, right, which is one of the pillars of Islam. The beginning of the month of Dhul Hijjah is also determined, of course, by the beginning, when the beginning of the month happens, and so our worship, in the times of worship, and is determined by the moon, the sun, and the moon. But it's a joyful time, believe it or not. It's part of our faith to actually go out and look for the new moon, especially the moon of Ramadan. The Prophet Muhammad, um, he used to urge his companions, to go out, and they would say, we used to compete with each other in seeing who would be able to see that
Yeah.
new moon that brings the happiness of the beginning of Ramadan. And when we see it, there's a supplication. We supplicate to God. We say, oh Allah, oh God, let this moon pass over with us with blessing and faith and safety and strong faith in Islam. And we supplicate to God when we see that also. You know, it's everything is connected to God. And when we look at the creation of God, then we see his greatness.
But you know, it's not just the moon that has this importance in Islamic tradition. But the sun also plays an incredibly important part, which Sheikh Abdul Barry also discussed with us.
It's a way to determine and calculate time, and also to calculate the times for prayer. So in Islam, both the sun and the moon actually play a very, very important role. In fact, every day we determine our prayer times. We pray 5 times a day. And so 5 times a day, our prayer times are determined by the position of the sun. These are two signs of the greatness of God. And so when you see them, then increase in your worship and invoke God and supplicate to Him. And so the sun and the moon, of course, are very, very important actually in determining and giving us and strengthening our faith when we look at the beauty of the sun and the moon.
And those sentiments are shared with so many other modern beliefs, which we'll hear about a little bit later with Slooh's spiritual correspondent, Helen Avery. Now, with the sighting of the new moon over this weekend, Muslims around the world are welcoming in the sacred month of Muharram. That's the first month in the Islamic lunar calendar that marks the Islamic New Year, 1438. And yesterday, the two-day-old moon marked the beginning of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, which is 5777. So, you know, all of this is really, these new moons and the full moons, as we've covered before, are just ingrained in so many cultures, religions, and faiths around the world. Now, before we move on, I want to take a moment to encourage everyone watching the show from around the globe to join our expedition to explore the universe with us, which we do every day and night here at Slooh. Now, our members are not passengers, but they sign up as working crew to take control of the robotic telescopes in the Canary Islands and our Chile Observatory to share the most interesting places in space with everyone else in the community. Slooh really is what we call social exploration. And together we've already visited over 50,000 different places in the sky and captured over 5 million photos. And working as a team makes it easy to learn from each other and share our diverse perspectives. And those are fueled in equal part by science and imagination and the human spirit to kind of search and wonder together. You know, who knows, we may be alone in the universe, but you'll never be alone at Slooh. And we've told you before, the secret is out, I'm afraid, a year in the making. There is a new Slooh coming. That's right, smarter and more powerful than ever. We are so excited to show it to you when it's ready. You're welcome aboard Slooh's expedition into outer space, which is free to try. So do join our adventure into the great unknown. Now, let's take a look at this live image. This is a live view from our dome cam at Slooh's flagship Canary Islands Observatory. And there we can see, just appearing in the dusk sky, that sliver of moon. And that's where you'll see the moon about 30 to 40 minutes after your local sunset. So wherever you are in the world, wherever the sun has set in the west, kind of look in that direction. And it can be quite difficult to make out. It comes out in a camera a little bit easier than it does visually, but take your time and you will spot this 3% phase, I think it is. It's tiny, tiny sliver of a new moon. Now, we are going to take a quick commercial break now, but when we come back, Helen Avery, Slooh's spiritual correspondent, is going to take a look at how modern pagans view this so-called black moon and the new moon. And that's a period associated for them with renewal. And later I'll be talking to Slooh astronomer Bob Berman about why the widely publicized black moon of the past month wasn't really a black moon at all, and why the real black moon is still to come, and you can see it here next month. But don't go away, we'll be right back after this short break.
Hello and welcome back to our coverage of the Black Moon here at Slooh. My name's Helen Avery and I'm the human spirit correspondent here at Slooh. So that's looking at the skies as how they inspire us to sort of look within, whether that's spiritually or as a culture together. So right now we're looking live at the Black Moon. As we know, it is a new moon, and for the context of what I'm going to be talking about, it's considered to be the second new moon in a month. So the new moon is seen as really important for a lot of religions and traditions. Some religions even base their calendar off of new moons. So right now we're seeing a couple of religions celebrating a new year as a result of that calendar. But the most shared sentiment around the new moon, whether it's from pagans or Druids or Wiccans, Buddhists and Hindus, Kabbalists, Christian mystics, is that the new moon is a time for deep introspection because it's dark, so there's nothing to distract us. Also, it's seen as a time for rebirth and renewal, so a time for us to change our ways, and that's because it's a new moon. And then also it's seen as a time to sow seeds. So the fact that we've got two new moons in a month is seen as a real blessing. We get two opportunities to do all of this. So quite literally, the new moon is a time, and if you're a gardener, you'll know this, to sow seeds. Lunar gravity pulls the water up to the top of the soil, which helps the seeds germinate. And at the same time, you're moving towards a full moon, so there is more light in the night sky, which also helps the seeds. And then a lot of traditions took this concept of the physical world and moved it inside to be like a metaphor. So on a new moon, neo-pagans and yogis and New Agers, myself, will have rituals to really sow seeds. So it's about reflecting on your wishes and desires, thinking about some of the things you'd like to shift, maybe jotting those down on a bit of paper and burning it, or just meditating on it, and then really setting intentions for what you would like to appear in your life come the full moon. So it's seen as a time to be very careful what you're wishing for and how you're using your words, because there are a lot of helping hands going on behind the scenes to help your words become a reality. And one pair of those healing hands is the goddess Lilith. She is the goddess of the Black Moon. And she has a couple of different ways. Well, there are two ways of looking upon Lilith. So in Hebrew mythology, Lilith was seen as a female demon. And then that sort of got taken in Christian mythology into Lilith being a friend of Satan. And both of those mystical traditions view Lilith as the first woman on earth. She was seen as arriving before Eve and trying to seduce Adam, and he rejected her. So she's seen as being sort of a dark force, and some people will look at the Black Moon as Lilith coming back full of evil deeds for the world. And you may have even seen some prophecies that the Black Moon means the end of the world. But let's remember that the Black Moon occurs every 32 months. We're still here, so I think we're good. And I called around some Wiccans and some witches to see if there was any black magic happening around this black moon, and they said no, that actually it was a time for them to go inside and really reflect upon their souls and what needed to be changed. So you can't find a good bad witch these days, sadly. But some more of the earth-based religions and traditions, like the pagans, and particularly neo-pagans, they see Lilith also as a goddess, but one that is very pure and loving. So they still view her as the first woman who came to Earth, and therefore they see her as the second goddess. So the first goddess is Mother Earth, and then the second goddess is Lilith. So she's very special, and because the black moon is the second new moon of the month, and the moon is a sign of femininity and the goddess energy, the neo-pagans kind of adopted the black moon as well as a time for Lilith to come, which is a little interesting because the pagans worked with a lunar calendar, so really technically they wouldn't have had 2 new moons in a month, but hey, whatever. And they see Lilith as her energy as a chance for us to reconnect to Earth and to look back on our ancestry and some of the things that have happened in our lives, and to again sort of ask for blessings from her to make those shifts. So very positive spin from the earth-based traditions on Lilith and the black moon. So a beautiful time for introspection, and what better way to go inside and celebrate the black moon than by looking up into the dark sky, like you're peering into your soul. So with that, I will leave you to your own introspection as we take a break. Thanks.
And welcome back to our Black New Moon show here at Slooh, as we look at this live panorama from Slooh's flagship observatory at the Institute of Astrophysics of the Canary Islands, high on that volcano. And I'm going to be talking about the link very briefly a little bit later on between fuller new moons and earthquakes. But anyway, that was Slooh's spiritual correspondent Helen Avery talking about the beliefs and associations made by some pagans and New Age communities to the new moon. And I think Helen has probably captured the quote of the year for Slooh: "You can't find a good bad witch when you need one." And I'm assuming that that description of Lilith is why the character was named Lilith in Frasier. Anyway, now then, we've been quite outspoken about saying that this new moon wasn't a black moon, as has been widely reported. Certainly not if you're applying the kind of long practice methods to establish the dates and times of various astronomical phenomena that astronomers have been using for decades. Now, here to help us understand what a black moon is and why this past new moon was not, in fact, a black moon, is Slooh astronomer Bob Berman. Bob, hello, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. Good to be here.
What do you make of these live images that we've been seeing? Maybe we can have a look at the half-meter telescope view of this tiny, thin sliver.
Gorgeous. There's something ineffable, something special about that sight of the returning, thin, waxing crescent moon, isn't there? Just it's just special. You can almost not put your finger on it.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. Now, Bob, how do astronomers determine when an astronomical event or phenomena is going to happen? It's also how astronomers around the globe coordinate their various observations and measurements, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, there was a time when we would do it by hand using tables. When I studied this stuff at school, that's how it had to be done. Of course, computers have taken over for more than 20 years, and so we use ephemerides of different sorts that are very, very accurate, so we can pin down the time of a new moon or a full moon or an eclipse really to a matter of the second, or at least at most to within a few seconds.
Now, in terms of this black moon, which the media were widely reporting was on September 30th. If we used what astronomers use, a time standard called Universal Time, UTC, it actually rose after midnight on October the 1st, didn't it?
Yes, and of course, the time of moon rise or moon setting, that doesn't matter. There's a moment when the moon is most at the same, what we call right ascension. Essentially, it's directly above or directly below the sun, closest to the sun generally at that time, and that's the moment of new moon. But because we live in a world with different time zones, it sometimes doesn't happen on the same day. So for the North American continent, South America, it happened on the last day of September, but for universal time, which is what astronomers use widely, and all points east from there, it was the next day. Therefore, it was in October, and therefore it did not qualify as a second new moon or black moon in that month of September.
And it was also reported, of course, in a lot of the press as being the Western Hemisphere, yes, it is a black moon, but the Eastern Hemisphere isn't. But that would actually put a lot of people who live in London on one edge of the Greenwich Meridian, which is the thing that separates the Western and Eastern Hemispheres. For one person living in one house, it would have been a black moon, but the other side, it wouldn't have been. And that's really why, we need this common standard, isn't it? So how important is it that astronomers all use, this time standard of universal time as when they're discussing, events in space and their observations?
Well, it is, of course, because we want to all be speaking the same language. Not to mention the fact that black moon is not an astronomy term. Amateur and professional astronomers, we don't call it that. So, and in fact, even in folklore, it has 4 different separate definitions. So depending upon which one you wish to choose, there's either black moon every month, or some months, or none at all in a month, or twice in a month.
February.
So all sorts of different meanings to it.
Yeah. Now, don't go anywhere, Bob, or our viewers, because we're going to take a quick commercial break. But when we come back, we'll continue this conversation about the black moon. And I'm interested to know what you think, Bob, about these different names applied to the various lunar phases and phenomena. And if our viewers have any thoughts on that subject, just tweet them to @Slooh, or if you've got any other questions for us. But we'll be right back after this quick commercial break. And welcome back to our continued discussion of the black moon here at Slooh, or the not black moon here at Slooh. I'm here with Slooh astronomer Bob Berman. Now, Bob, we've been talking about the recent headlines surrounding this new moon and how this most recent one doesn't really qualify as a black moon. But before we talk about this any further, a Slooh member, Jonathan Tooten, just before the show, sent me a press release saying that the Canary Islands, exactly where we're watching now, this is where Slooh's Canary Islands Observatory is, suffered a swarm of earthquakes, 90 mini earthquakes yesterday. And I know that for a long period of time, kind of conspiracy theorists have been linking this, full moon and new moon with earthquakes. And frankly, a lot of their discussion has been dismissed by the professionals. But there was a study that came out last week, I think by a university in Japan, which has actually found some kind of statistical link between earthquakes and full or new moons. Why? I mean, to me, it kind of feels quite intuitive that that would happen because the tides rise, which means you've got a greater water mass over a particular body of land. Have you got any thoughts on that one?
Well, yes. About 25 years ago, another statistical analysis found the same thing, and that's because at new moon and full moon, there are more stresses on Earth tidally than at other times. Now, is that enough to cause earthquakes, even minor ones. It just so happens that the tidal stresses from the moon and the sun are only about 1/2000th the torque normally found in crustal rock. So it's
Okay.
very, very tiny. Nonetheless, you'd think that if an earthquake were right on the edge of happening, that could be the last straw that causes it to happen. And therefore, it's not surprising that statistically it might happen. Earthquakes might happen more often at around new moon or full moon than at other times.
Okay, I think this new study was particularly associating the increased mass of water and the movement of that mass for that. But that's going to be an interesting story to follow over the coming months. Now, let's take a look at these live feeds, Bob. We are past sunset there at the Canary Islands Observatory, and here we see from the half-meter telescope. You know, Bob, the half-meter telescope, tell viewers why a half-meter telescope isn't the best kind of telescope to use to view the moon.
Is not the best? Well,
Not the best,
I'm one of those who think that the bigger the better with anything, even though it's almost overkill. You could see the moon just fine through a Target or a Walmart telescope. But when you have qualities such as Slooh has here, you could really bring it into play. But on the other hand, every telescope has a minimum magnification, and we really want to bring the whole moon into view. So sometimes the problem is too much power, and then you can't quite see a very wide field view, although Slooh gets around that.
We do, and in the half-meter view here, one of the biggest issues is a large telescope collects far more light. And of course, the moon is such a bright object, we actually have to use 2 filters to be able to use the half-meter telescope to get this view. Otherwise, it totally overwhelms the camera. And you can see here, somebody asked in chat actually, what's this funny star pattern? And we're having to take exposures so short with this incredibly sensitive CCD camera on that telescope that we can actually see the iris shutter. We can see the leaves of it just slightly ghosting on these images. Now, Bob, back to black moons. How frequently, you mentioned that depending upon what definition you use, depends on, they could happen once a month, but what are the thoughts on how many of these black moons we normally get in a single year?
Well, because it's not a scientific or astronomical definition, we're free to use any of the folklore definitions. One definition is, as we know, the second new moon within the same month, and then the second one of those is the black moon. We'll have one on Halloween. That happens not that unoften, just about once a year, once every 2 years. Or others say that it's the third new moon in a season that has 4. That happened last year on February 16th. Or another definition is it's a month with no new moons at all, which can only happen in February. Or some consider a black moon every new moon, because on old-fashioned calendars, they're depicted as big black discs, big circles, and that looks like a black moon. So people would call it, well, it's the time of the black moon, meaning the new moon. And by that definition, it's once every month. Okay, so you have your choice. You can have as many black moons as you like.
As you like. But we at Slooh, we've decided that we're just going to stick to the single definition, which is 2 new moons in a single month. And to get out of this disparity of what time zone you live in, we're going to use the time standard that astronomers use around the world, which is UTC, which does mean that the last new moon occurred just on October the 1st, on Saturday, and the next one is going to be occurring, I think it's late on the 29th of October, isn't it, Bob? So that will be our true black moon.
Yep. So we still have that to look forward to and mark on the calendar. And if we practice witchcraft or what have you, and we've been saving that occasion for some special ceremony, well, don't worry. You haven't lost it. You haven't forgotten.
You haven't missed it.
It's not past. It's still to come.
Yeah, I mean it couldn't be better time, could it? A black moon the night before Halloween. But Bob, you know, we've talked about this before, and it's really only been over the last decade that a lot of these names have been sprouting up for the moon. We've got now the black moon, we've got blue moon, blood moon, harvest moon, wolf moon. So some of those are old definitions, but we've also got this term supermoon and micro or mini moon, and what we call megamoon as well. So what are your thoughts about all of these names?
Well, Paul, I'm of two minds with it. On the one hand, most of these are brand new. They're almost media creations, they're almost advertising creations to get people interested. We called a total lunar eclipse a lunar eclipse. It does turn reddish, but to call it a blood moon, well, that's dramatic.
Yeah.
And to call a large moon that we have once a year, there's a moon larger than most, although this November, we're really going to go with an unusually large moon, and to call that a supermoon. But on the other hand, it does get people interested in observing the moon and interested in astronomy, and that's only a good thing.
Yeah, and I think I come out on it exactly the same there, Bob. You know, it's next month's moon, I'm being told, is a super beaver moon. But, you know, some of those moons, November's moon actually is going to be the super beaver moon. A lot of the ones that we've dealt with on our full moon shows with the Old Farmer's Almanac, you know, down the years, these names have been used to mark certain things during the year. So the buck moon is when the North American Indians would start hunting, you know, bucks and deer. And we obviously know the harvest moon, which we covered last month. But I would agree with you that even all of these other names, you know, the black moon, the blue moon, the mega moon, the super moon, all of those, if it sparks some interest in anybody to gaze up at our moon or the night sky, I think that's a good thing. And you mentioned actually supermoon, and we started using that term quite heavily in 2011, and it did get picked up quite a bit by the media. But unfortunately, I think it was a year or two ago, NASA looked at another definition of this supermoon, and so they started saying, no, there are 3 supermoons this year. And that to me kind of dilutes the story. So that's where we started to say, you know, well, yes, okay, if you take that definition, 3 full moons do fit within the supermoon definition in a row, concurrent new moons, but we're only interested in the absolute biggest, the one largest moon a year. And that's why we then use the term megamoon to try and differentiate it from these other things. So just explain to viewers what actually creates this supermoon or megamoon.
Well, because the moon's orbit is not a circle but an ellipse, every month it reaches its closest point. Plus the orbit itself changes shape. It stretches out, it gets rounder. And so once a year, we're going to get to the absolute closest moon of that year. And let's call that the supermoon. And once in a while, it'll happen when the orbit is really stretched out and it'll be unusually close to us. But just so people don't get disappointed, we should always remember that if you go out and look at it, it's really not going to jump out at you as a larger looking moon. It's just barely noticeable, if that is any larger than any other moon. So it's a conceptual thing. It's a great thing. It's an idea. It teaches people about the moon's orbit, but it's not the way it's often depicted as this giant moon in the sky that's going to really catch your attention. It's just not like that.
Yeah, they're usually, the articles about a supermoon are usually illustrated with a Photoshop moon, which is looking absolutely gigantic. But the way I tell, actually, Bob, about how big the moon is at any time is that the half-meter telescope, which we're looking at live here, it's peculiar. It is just at the field of view, the amount of sky that we can see, where a megamoon, a supermoon, doesn't quite fit within the frame. So it's always just chopped off a little bit. But just like we are tonight, we can tell that the moon isn't that close to Earth because the whole thing fits within a single image. So anyway, Bob, thank you so much for joining us today for the Not the Black Moon show. And hopefully we'll see you back for the actual Black Moon show, which is going to be our Halloween show this year.
Thank you, Paul. Good to be here.
That was Slooh astronomer Bob Berman. It's always great to see Bob. But, you know, we do agree on so much of this stuff, you know, that these names, you know, yeah, they're used by the media and picked up and sometimes distorted a little bit, just like this black moon has been. But anything that gets people looking up at the night sky is okay in Slooh's view. Now, that just about wraps it up for here for our Black New Moon show, or should that really be the Not Black Moon show? I'd like to thank our guests. We had Sheikh Abdul Bari Yahya of the Al Maghrib Institute. We hope to have him back on the show very quickly, actually, very soon. And we also had Slooh spiritual correspondent Helen Avery telling us about the beliefs of pagans and Wiccans and some New Age communities about new moons and the fact that it needs renewal and things like this. And of course, we had Slooh astronomer Bob Berman join us on the show. What a great show. I certainly enjoyed it. I hope you did as well. Now, we hope to see you back here for another live exploration of space. And you won't have to wait long either, because on Friday, we're heading out to watch the shooting stars, the meteors from the Draconid meteor shower, and Eric Edelman is going to be hosting that one starting at 8 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to be talking about meteor showers, comets, and hear the story of how Hercules faced off against a deadly dragon. Now, if you can't wait until then, make sure you join the Slooh community, because we do this every night here at Slooh as we share the night sky using Slooh's mighty telescopes. And we can see we've got a few clouds here, but the domes are open, so the telescopes are about to spring into action. I'm Paul Cox. This has been another astronomical production from Slooh.com. We hope to see you very soon. Goodbye for now.